If you've been treating your knee pain for months and it hasn't gone away yet, I want you to stop for a second because your knee isn't the problem. It never was. I'm Hugh Darnell. I'm an exercise physiologist. I work with some of the best athletes in the country, and I've helped rebuild over 2,000 athletes get back from pain and injury to high level performance, winning Commonwealth Games medals and going to the Olympics. And the most common thing I see across every single one of them is they treat the wrong thing. I had a client, Sean, exemplifies this perfectly. 9 months chasing knee pain. He was seeing physios. They were telling him he had patellar tendinopathy, which he didn't. So wrong diagnosis. He would run and then he would be in pain walking for days later. First assessment, we got him in. He hit me up on Instagram after seeing a thing I posted online. And he said, mate, help. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get back to running. Fast forward 3 months, the big fella, he got there. So in this video, I'm gonna share exactly my system, the new way of rehab that helps athletes overcome these unfixable injuries and get rid of the pain, because we don't chase these phantom symptoms. We actually get to the root cause. And that's what we do with Sean, and that's what I'm gonna teach you now. I'm gonna show you a test that we can do that just gives you a bit of an understanding of how this concept works. You can do it at home right now, and you're gonna see if this is a big issue for you. So the test you can do at home right now is level 1. It's a single leg stability or balance test. We go eyes open, and we should be able to hold this for 60 seconds. If we can't, we've got some serious balance issues that are gonna manifest as some inabilities on the run. Level 2, we should be able to go eyes closed for 60-second hold here as well. So obviously we're not going to run around with our eyes closed, but balance, it's predicated on 3 different systems: our vestibular system, our visual system, and our proprioceptive system. So when we take away vision, which we're most heavily reliant on, we get a really good insight into the other 2. Proprioception is another fancy way of saying our experience of our environment. If I put my foot here, is it actually here? And then can I reorganize myself to have good balance? Level 3, we're gonna go float the heel, little mini calf raise. In this position, we should be able to hold for 60 seconds as well. And as you can appreciate, this is like the toe off in our run. So holding here gives us a good understanding of our foundation in a less stable environment. As Charles Poliquin said, can't fire a rocket launcher off a canoe. So how stable is our foundation dictates how much force we can produce upstream as well. Level 4, I can't do this one. 60 seconds, calf raise up, hold, floating heel. And again, if you want to pass mark on level 4, should be able to hold that for 60 seconds. If I have a headache because I'm headbutting a wall and I take a painkiller to get rid of the headache, I'm not really addressing the reason for me having a headache in the first place. So sure, I might get rid of the headache, but it's gonna come straight back because I keep headbutting the wall. It's the same thing with your knee pain. If your knee pain is coming from somewhere else within the body and you only get fixated and obsessed with the knee and forget about everything else, like the fact the knee is actually connected to a hip, a core, and below here we've got ankle and foot control. And all of these play a factor in single leg stance and stability control during the run process. So if we come over to the whiteboard here, as you can see, we've got my drawing, pretty poor I know, but we've got the pelvic girdle, we've got the femur, so the top of our thigh bone coming down to the knee joint. If I have poor control around my hip, so let's think weakness around your lateral hip stabilizers, you might see this when someone's running, they're kind of collapsing in, then hips dropping. What this can do is create a rotation inwards. And because this doesn't exist in isolation, like you can see here, if I rotate here, my knee is also going to rotate inwards. So what happens? I drop here, rotate, it creates this knee coming inwards towards my midline, and it changes where the load goes through on the joint. So that's above. As you can see down below, pronation or collapsing of the arch towards the ground, essential for the whole gait cycle. But if we get excessive pronation, or we get uncontrolled pronation, this can create excessive movement again, dumping down this way, creates rotation that then again comes in towards the midline. So as you can see here, a little analogy, the knee is the abused middle child of the hip and the ankle. As you can see here, if the hip control's poor, the foot control's poor, the knee's gonna start to cop load in different ways apart from the way it was actually designed to load. Alternatively, we can also come above the hip position here. So if we think of core control, We've got things like obliques, rectus abdominis, a lot of layers and muscles that are designed that when we hit the ground, want to control our rib and hip position. Because again, if I'm changing shape through my spine, it's going to change position through my hips, which then changes down through my knee. And as you can appreciate, these links of the chain start to make a lot of sense, that we can't change one level of the chain without having a ripple effect downstream or upstream. And sure, direct knee strength is super important for knee pain. Let's not skirt around that fact and deny that localized strength around things like the quad or the hamstring. Like let's take the hamstring for example. Muscles, they have actions and functions. So when an action of a muscle occurs, it takes its origin closer to its insertion. So let's take the hamstring. When this contracts, it brings the knee into flexion up towards here, or it takes the hip into extension back towards here. But functionally, what the hammy does is when our foot hits the ground and our knee needs stability, it stops the tibia anteriorly translating. So what does that mean? When my foot hits the ground, if my hammy's strong, it acts like the brakes on a system that stop my shin sliding forward, which can create irritation around the knee joint. Alternatively, quads, when they're strong as well, they can really help us dampen load on a joint, because when we're assessing a joint, we want to look at the active restraints around the system. So joints, they're passive in nature. They can't control movement, but there's things in there, obviously cartilage, meniscus, ligaments, that are designed to help us have good control around the joint from a passive restraint system. But then the active restraint system, muscles, nervous system, they allow us to put load in the way we want it around the joint. So, way of saying quad strength, hamstring strength, and even calf strength from things like your soleus, there's really good evidence to suggest that having stronger calves can really impact how we load through the knee as well. So we don't want to, just say it's always the hip, it's always the core, it's always the foot, because we want to address everything from a really holistic lens, and that includes the whole kinetic chain. Because when we're on the ground, we're going to have a lot of different things that we want to get into. I'm going to show you some exercises and assessments that are going to allow you to really understand where you're falling down and where you need to spend time with your programming. So we're going to literally start from the ground up with the foot. As you can see here, the foot, it's a super pliable and mobile part of the body. We've got 33 bones, 26 joints, over 10,000 nerve endings. And when we throw this puppy in a shoe, we lose its function and its ability to actually work for us on a thing like a run, cut, change direction, jump. And then, as I just showed you, that's gonna then change how the knee's taking load as well. So things like towel crunches, toe yoga, it's useless. Don't bother with it. If you've overcome those low-level activation drills, we need to appreciate that the forces during running, you're jogging, it's 3 to 4 times body weight that goes through a single leg. And at sprinting, it can be up to 6 to 7 times body weight. So you think standing and crunching a little towel is going to do anything? I'm going to have a hard time convincing me elsewise. What we do need to do is add some heavy load to the foot. I love exercises like the foot bridge, floating heel positions, heavy isometrics, overcoming isometrics and yielding. And then we want to think about, once we've addressed the foot, coming into the calf. In straight leg and bent knee positions, we really want to tick off both because they can be a key for developing strength in positions that matter. So we're going to have muscles like the gastroc and the soleus. Again, soleus has been shown to have a really good stabilizing effect over the knee, and it experiences up to 8 to 9 times body weight loading during a run phase as well. So strengthening that in exercises like a bent knee calf raise seated. So we want to get up to about 1.5 times body weight for 5 repetitions on a seated calf raise, because that's showing us your relative strength numbers are exactly where they need to be. And we also want to hammer heavy single leg calf raises. So again, this is going to get the foot going, but it also strengthens the calf. Upstream from there, we're now going to hammer hammies and quads. Hamstring in isolation, some knee flexion work. We're going to go on an exercise ball just to develop good control around the hip at the same time. And then if you've got access to things like a cable, we can load it up. Prone hamstring curl machine, another great way. And then hamstring in hip extension. So things like RDL, single leg RDL, great ways of getting the hammy going. Quads, obviously all your squat, split squat variations, if we have any major deficits or knee pain that's stopping us from using this. Coming upstream, we also want to then identify areas around the hip. So lateral hip stabilizers with the glutes, hip flexors, adductors if they're weak, hip extension with the glutes, and then really construct a program that addresses what I call the compass protocol, which is addressing all the major movements of the hip flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation. Once we've addressed this, we come upstream even further into the core. And I wanted to show you a concept right now that is super important to understand. It's called the zone of apposition, or the stack. But what we're really referencing is how good is your awareness to know where your rib and hip position is in space, because that really dictates all the other joints going downstream towards the ground and how efficient and effectively you can transfer load through the midsection. Because the stack is referring to pelvic floor on diaphragm. If I'm able to create a good canister and stable position through my midsection, one, it's way more reliable and reproducible. And number two, it's way more efficient and economical to run because I'm not dissipating and wasting energy every time I hit the ground. So if we see this rib flare, flex, rib flare, flex, instead of hitting the ground holding position, all my energy is just being wasted and dissipating out to the side. So once we've addressed core in this plane, we'd call that anti-extension flexion work, but also moving through range. Then we'd flip your side on, and that same concept that we just showed you with the stack. If you think of the stack in this way, as I hit the ground, I don't want to compress down laterally or lose too much rotational control through my core. And this might be the most important piece and something heaps of people completely neglect. And that's actually assessing and looking at run or sport-specific movements. Because you can build as much strength as you want in isolation, but if you can't integrate that into a pattern that matters, or you're just doing something crazy with the technique itself, we're really just going to be chasing our tail in circles. The amount of athletes I assess who have had long-term knee pain with running, and no one's ever actually looked at their run technique, it actually blows my mind. And then when we look and assess their run, taking the top-down approach, we find some glaringly obvious things they're doing that really set them up for a disaster and put that knee in a position that it's going to cop a beating. So the foot bridge, this one really challenges the arch control, which is essential for building strong and pliable feet. All right, this overcoming isometric drill puts the foot under a lot of load, but it also gets the Achilles and the calf exposed to a lot of strength work. We're pushing into something that's not going to move, so we can really rip as hard as we can. All right, on the hamstring curl, obviously a body weight variation here, but it really challenges hip extension and knee flexion at the same time, which is both the actions of the hammy, so you should really feel it. What we don't want to see is the hips sinking down as we go. So hips up, curl in. All right, this reverse crunch with a little dead bug challenges that anti-extension element of the core, the ability to hold the stack, flexion, resisting extension, and then getting the hip flexors going through full range. Got the bent knee calf raise. As I said, the soleus has a really strong stabilizing effect over the knee. Make sure the heel's sinking down, strong contraction at the top. Obviously I'm using a dumbbell here. If you got access to a seated calf raise machine, happy days. I highlighted a few assessments and a framework for you to understand where the real driver of your pain is coming from. Like I said, it might not be the knee. Look at the foot, the hip, the core, everything, because it's all important. Drop a comment below if this is hit or if you found it helpful.